Hello, everyone. My name is MacLane Wilkison. I am one of the co-founders of Threshold Network. Threshold is a home of tBTC, which is the longest running, most robust, trust minimized Bitcoin bridge in production on the market today. It's been around for over 5 years now. And actually, a quick shout out to the panel before. I think it was Boaz who said people would prefer to use the Citibank Bitcoin bridge than some of these trust minimized systems that a lot of you in the audience are building today. And that literally caused me PSD because that's the issue that we've been dealing with at tBTC for the past 5 years. And it's actually worse, I think, than what he said. Because not only do institutions prefer to use something like Citibank BTC, but they literally today prefer to use WBTC, which is secured by BitGo, which is good, and also Justin Sun, which is not so good if you're familiar with his track record regarding collateral. So I think a great lead into what I want to talk about and what we think about every day at Threshold, which is trust minimization and how can we deliver a way to use your Bitcoin beyond just holding it and transferring it in DeFi. And basically taking these principles that Satoshi had around how do you remove points of trust in systems, which he did obviously for Bitcoin, and trying to project those same values and principles into the broader Bitcoin DeFi space so you can actually earn yield or borrow against or utilize your Bitcoin in more interesting ways. So unfortunately today, the vast supermajority of Bitcoin that's being used in DeFi is held by single centralized custodians. The WBTC 10 plus billion TVL, similar with BTCB by Binance. And I think this has significantly inhibited Bitcoin's utility and adoption within DeFi. If you compare, Bitcoin, DeFi TVL is about 120 billion, but Bitcoin is massively underrepresented relative to its sort of market cap dominance in the DeFi space. And I think a lot of this is because there are not acceptable solutions that sufficiently strive to meet these trust minimization, censorship-resistant principles. That said, the potential demand for Bitcoin and DeFi is absolutely massive. I think certainly preaching to the choir here, but Bitcoin is by far the most pristine crypto asset. And I think, in my opinion, not only the most pristine crypto asset, but the most pristine asset in the world today, period. That includes gold, stocks, real world assets. I think there's growing understanding of why Bitcoin is important. And by extension, people are going to be wanting to deploy that in ways to earn yield or borrow against it or to engage in traditional financial activities beyond just holding. That said, what people are looking for is not being delivered sufficiently by the market today. I think people want something that's super transparent, that they can permissionlessly access. And by that, I mean they can mint, they can bridge their Bitcoin to a DeFi ecosystem without asking permission from some centralized entity, and they can redeem back to native Bitcoin similarly without having to ask or request permission from some centralized entity. And trying to striving to meet these principles that Bitcoin laid out. And a lot of you are probably already familiar with tBTC, but for those who are not, I'd like to reintroduce it. That's what we've been working on for the past 5 years. So tBTC is a permissionless and trust minimized Bitcoin bridge and Bitcoin asset. Today it's connected to over 7 chains, ETH-L1, many major EVM-L2s. It's backed by Threshold cryptography. And specifically, it uses something called distributed key generation to shard the custody wallets into 100 pieces, distribute those pieces across many different legally independent, financially independent signers, so that you're not having to trust a single entity to hold on to your Bitcoin. And it relies ultimately on this, an honest majority of these signers that the Bitcoin is sharded across to basically validate whether a deposit or a redemption is valid. It's also had full proof of reserve since launch. So you can go to tBTC Scan, which is the tBTC Explorer, and you can very easily see all the wallets in the system. You can see the constituents in terms of who are the signers on all of those wallets. You can see how much Bitcoin is there. You can see every single deposit into the system, every single redemption out of the system. And it's been relatively successful. It's around $500 million in TVL today. Over, I believe, the $3.6 billion bridge volume number in terms of mint and redeems is for V2 specifically, which has been operating for a couple years. And that number is actually ramping up a lot. I believe it's been over $1 billion in bridge volume this past quarter. So we're seeing like pretty insatiable demand for people to move in and out of Bitcoin into various DeFi ecosystems. It's live today on 7 chains. I think as some previous panels have mentioned, there's huge demand to borrow against Bitcoin. That's the primary use case that we see people using tBTC for today. Roughly a third of all the tBTC supply is used to borrow stables in Aave or Spark or Compound. It makes sense, obviously, like if you have a lot of Bitcoin, maybe you want to retain exposure, a long exposure to that Bitcoin. You don't want to sell it. You don't want to potentially incur a taxable event. So you could instead just borrow stables against it, use those stables to buy a house, to lever on Bitcoin, basically do whatever you want. And it's been running for over 5 years now. So for the first 2 years, it was running a V1 system, which was over-collateralized. The current system removes this over-collateralization requirement. It has been running in production for roughly 3 years with no loss of user funds. And everything is, like as I said, 100% on-chain verifiable. You can see peg-ins, peg-outs. You can see all the wallets, the constituent signers for all those wallets, and full proof of reserves. And I said all this to say, like, we've been around for a while. We've gone through multiple cycles, and we've seen a lot of other alternatives come and go. So tBTC V2, the current version, launched in early 2023. And just a couple months after that is when shit really hit the fan with FTX and Alameda. And that ended up taking down RenBTC and SoBTC, which is a wrapped Bitcoin on Solana. They were nominally decentralized bridges, decentralized wrappers, but it turned out in reality that FTX and or Alameda had all the keys for the underlying collateral. So what happened when those guys went down is their respective estates basically seized that collateral and it went to creditors. Not good. Something very similar happened with a project called multiBTC, which I think at its peak was a couple of $1 billion of TVL. Nominally a decentralized bridge. In reality, I think it was one guy had all the keys to the underlying assets on a personal Google Cloud account, and he went to China and got arrested, and either the CCP or just some corrupt local law enforcement now apparently has all the underlying collateral, so also not great. HBTC, which was the Wobi HTX Bitcoin wrapper. After Justin Sun acquired Wobi, something happened to the collateral. I don't know, maybe you can ask him. He's probably not going to tell you what happened, but that depegged. I think net today is trading at like $2,000 or $3,000, which is definitely not current Bitcoin price of $110,000. About a year ago, saw Justin Sun again. Now he's involved with the WBTC custody. That caused a pretty virulent immune response in the DeFi ecosystem. A lot of protocols basically jettisoned WBTC as collateral because they were concerned about the credit risk. Coinbase delisted WBTC similarly because they were concerned about the credit risk and the custody risk. And it's a lot of words to say, like tBTC has just chugged along that entire time. I think by far the most Lindy trust minimized bridge running today with a significant amount of TVL at risk over time and several $1 billion in processed bridge volume. It's on the ETH1, obviously, is where the bulk of liquidity for tBTC is. It's also on the major EVM-L2s, Base, Arbitrum, Optimism. Currently on one non-EVM chain, which is Solana, although we're building the motion to very quickly, in the next couple of months, launch on many new chains, both EVM and non-EVM. And in terms of what people are doing with it, it's pretty much what you expect. As I said, the biggest use case is borrowing against your Bitcoin. So borrowing stables on Aave, Compound, Spark, or minting stable coins via CDPs on like CRV USD. A lot of yield opportunities. So if you'd like to earn some yield on your Bitcoin, you can deposit it in LP into AMMs like Curve or Uniswap. There's also a lot of yield vaults which will manage those positions for you. You can trade perps with tBTC on GMX, on Arbitrum. And basically anything you can do in DeFi, you can do with tBTC. It's on, effectively, at least on ETH1, all of the blue chip DeFi protocols. In terms of what's ahead, we're definitely not stopping. As I said before, 7 chains today, but we're building the motion to rapidly expand to, essentially, we want to be on every ecosystem that has demand for tBTC. We want to meet users where they are. We don't have an opinion on whether you should use your Bitcoin and Ethereum and Solana and Sui and anywhere. We want to basically deliver it to where users are and where they want to use it. But that also means we want to be able to give people a way to directly go from Bitcoin to their preferred ecosystem of choice. Today, the way tBTC works is, except for Arbitrum and Base, which have direct minting, the UX is pretty kludgy. You have to stop over at ETH first. So you first mint to ETH1, and then from there you bridge to Solana or Optimism or wherever you want to go. And obviously, we want to make it very easy for people to go directly from Bitcoin to the preferred chain without that stopover, and then similarly being able to go from their preferred chain back to native Bitcoin. Looking further out, I think there's been a ton of discussion today about new bridge designs like BitVM. When we started tBTC, BitVM didn't exist. The first version of tBTC was what we call an economically secured bridge. And basically what that means is if you wanted to be a signer in the system and help custody the underlying Bitcoin, you had to post more collateral in ETH than you would be helping to secure in Bitcoin. So for every Bitcoin that you secured, you had to post 150% of the value of that Bitcoin as ETH, as a kind of collateral. And obviously, from a user perspective, that's great because you can, if the bridge steals your funds, you can be made whole with that collateral. The problem is it's this massively expensive opportunity cost of capital. So like signers had to post this huge amount, and it basically made the minting capacity of the system very, very low, and effectively made it like not usable in DeFi because you couldn't basically build sufficient TVL to get onboarded into relevant protocols. With tBTC v2, we fixed that. So we removed this over-collateralization requirement on the part of signers. We massively expanded the signer sets. So instead of 2 of 3 wallets, it expanded to 51 of 100 wallets in terms of how many pieces the key would be sharded into. And obviously, that made the system much more scalable. And I think until very recently, it seemed like this sort of honest majority probabilistic security model was basically the best that you could achieve if you didn't want to go down the single trusted centralized custodian approach. I think there's been a ton of discussion about it already, but about a year or two ago, BitVM pointed the way to potentially being able to improve that security assumption from an honest majority to a 1 of n. So we're obviously very interested in potentially upgrading tBTC to use that once the technology is sufficiently mature, and then moving tBTC even before BitVM to an app chain so that we could do very fast multi-chain settlement to and from Bitcoin. Right now, as I said, it has to stop over on ETH, which recently hasn't been expensive, but historically it could be quite expensive in terms of gas costs and very slow. And then just to leave off on a possibly controversial note, as far as I'm aware, and I'm glad I'm saying it here because I could be corrected after the talk if it's not the case, and I'd like to know, none of the current BitVM2 bridges in production today actually have a real 1 of n trust assumption. To the extent of my knowledge, all the BitVM systems that are deployed on side systems like Ethereum or Sui or wherever. And Bitcoin can actually verify proofs from that side system. So you have to rely on the validators of that side system basically telling you what the actual state of the chain is. So you're trusting them to do that and trusting that they're not maintaining, they're not just basically lying to you and presenting you a private fork. So basically, I think BitVM2 will get there eventually, but it's not there yet. And essentially all these systems are, in my opinion, worse, less Lindy, less proven, less robust, less mature versions of just an honest majority bridge. And if you're looking at probabilistic security, tBTC is by far the most battle tested and the most Lindy. It's been live for more than 5 years. no funds lost, billions of bridge volume. So once again, just use tBTC. We're very interested in connecting with ecosystems that want Bitcoin liquidity. We can help you plug in directly to Bitcoin, have permissionless mints and redeems. We're very interested in connecting with protocols that want to use Bitcoin as collateral, tBTC as collateral, and also LPs that are interested in deploying their Bitcoin into various ecosystems. So very happy to connect with you and discuss, how we can do that and point you in the right direction if you're interested in earning yield. That's it from me. Some relevant links at the bottom. Our DApp allows you to mint and redeem. It's just dashboard.threshold.network. There's a good Dune dashboard with some relevant stats and statistics. And you can follow us on X. Thank you very much.